Hello and welcome. Thank you for coming this evening. I just wanted to wait a minute and let people join. I'm told that we had 200 people signed up for the call this evening, and we're just, that's incredible. It's exciting and wonderful. This is a terrific way to grow our community and expand the group of people who are committed to finding treatments for CMT. My name is Clary Simpson. I'm the mother of a CMT1A patient and CEO of the CMT Research Foundation. I joined CMT because of the foundation's singular focus on finding treatments and cures for CMT as soon as possible. During the years before Pat Livney and Susan Rudiger started CMTRF in 2018, I was enormously frustrated by the lack of progress for CMT patients, and particularly for my daughter. There was not a lot of funding and no viable treatments in development, and few neurologists who understood CMT. But today, all of us at the Research Foundation are proud and excited that we have helped create momentum in drug development for CMT, and especially CMT1A. You'll hear more from Dr. Suko and Dr. Egeskitha shortly. And tonight, you'll also hear from Peter De Silva, board member and chair of the 1A Endgame campaign. But first, a little housekeeping note. If you have questions along the way, please put them into the Q&A box in the toolbar on your Zoom screen. Put them in when you're thinking of them. We will collect the questions and then discuss them together at the end of our session. And since we have so many new faces this evening, I'm going to ask you a small favor. On your screen, there should be a brief 4-question poll that pops up. It's completely optional, but we'd love to know where you come from and what your primary interests are. So I'm going to give you a moment to answer the questions before we proceed. All right, Susan, let's move on. So in recent years, there has been significant progress in rare diseases and specifically in the field of gene therapy. The approval of gene therapies for neuromuscular diseases like Duchenne muscular dystrophy and spinal muscle atrophy encourages us to explore gene therapy for CMT. And we are doing that very aggressively as we speak. But we also continue to pursue different types of treatments for 1A, from small molecules to RNA-targeted therapies, because we know that one treatment may not be right for all patients. And as you can see on this slide, that has proven true for spinal muscle atrophy. One size doesn't fit all. But the level of activity in the CMT field is extremely exciting. Can we go to the next slide? In 2023, the FDA granted orphan drug designations to Armatus Bio, DTX Pharma, now Novartis, Vanda Pharmaceuticals, and Toolgen. We saw an increase in biotech financing and licensing activity, and overall greater interest from pharma, investors, and scientists than ever before, and true, genuine enthusiasm from the scientists who've been working in CMT for a long time. The Research Foundation has had an outsized impact on bringing drug developers to work in CMT. So on the next slide, you'll see this list of companies that are working in CMT1A. Now, I know that you probably can't read the slide very well because the type is small and sort of light. But here's the important point. In 2019, there were 12 companies around the world doing work in CMT1A. Today, there are 21 companies. That's 9 new companies, 8 of them funded by the CMT Research Foundation. And these include programs in gene therapy, small molecules, and other biologics. So in just 5.5 years, the Research Foundation has invested $11 million in research, supporting 23 projects. 11 of those 23 are CMT1A programs. And of those 11 1A projects, 5 have yielded preclinical candidates, which means that the companies have identified a compound that with further development and extensive safety experiments could become a candidate for human clinical trials. So now let me tell you a little bit about how we work for those of you who may not be as familiar with the CMT Research Foundation. Our approach is very straightforward, but it's complicated given that CMT is actually a collection of many genetic diseases, not just one. And while our focus tonight is on 1A, we're already seeing that some of the 1A work can potentially be applicable to other types and support our mission to eliminate all types of CMT. So over here, as I look on the left, the Research Foundation starts with a focus on translational research, which means we fund projects that have a clear path to the clinic and to the patient. We work with exceptional researchers within the CMT space, but we also reach out to scientists and companies working in other diseases who might have an approach or a platform that can solve a delivery challenge in CMT or provide a new gene therapy approach. DTX Pharma is a great example of this, and you'll hear more about that. In addition, we've gathered a team of the best scientific advisors, clinicians, researchers, CMT experts, and drug hunters to define the types of projects that we should fund. These are professionals who volunteer their time to support the mission and collaborate to create real therapeutic breakthroughs for patients. And none of this, absolutely none of it, would be possible without our generous supporters. All of the CMT Research Foundation's work is funded by donors, patients, families, their friends, big dollars and small dollars all come together to find treatments for CMT patients. Now, before I turn things over to the scientists, I know I've kind of thrown a lot of information at you, a few numbers here and there, but I really want to emphasize that while our mission is singularly about funding research, at the beginning and the end of each day, we know that it's all about patients. Marshall, Stella, Bella, Leonore, Caden, and Juliana. We understand the frustration, the physical and emotional pain of living with CMT, and a parent's fear of not knowing what is to come in your child's future. I'm sure that many of you on this call know exactly what I'm talking about. So the next part of our program will feature Dr. Artie Suko and Dr. Ryan Egeskitha about the science. Some of you may already know Artie. He is a huge patient advocate. He got to know many patients in the course of building his company and developing what we hope will be one of the very first treatments for 1A patients. He created a wall of patient photographs and personal stories in the office so that his entire team could remember every day who they were working to help. Dr. Artie Suko, founder of DTX Pharma, CMTRF board member, and lead of the Research Advisory Committee. And I am delighted that Artie is joined by Dr. Ryan Egeskitha, the new director of research at CMT Research Foundation. Ryan got her PhD at UC Irvine in pharmaceutical sciences, and she comes to us by way of DTX and Novartis. We couldn't be more excited to have Ryan leading the drug development at CMT Research Foundation. So I'm going to hand it over to you two now. Thank you.
Thank you, Clary. And hi, everyone. I'm very excited to have joined the CMTRF and to begin doing everything in my power to advance drug development for CMT and hopefully get a therapy to patients. But even though CMT is considered a rare disease, 1 in 2,500 people are affected, which is not so rare. And about half of all CMT patients have the CMT1A subtype, which is caused by a duplication in the gene called PMP22. Healthy individuals have 2 copies of PMP22, while CMT1A patients have 3 copies. This extra PMP22 gene copy results in extra PMP22 mRNA or message RNA, which translates to extra PMP22 protein. Now, PMP22 is produced in a type of cell called a Schwann cell, which is responsible for creating the protective coating around a nerve cell, which allows it to transfer an electrical signal along a nerve axon, much like how the wire cables connected to our computers right now have some sort of protective coating, which allows the signal from the source to efficiently reach its destination. The extra PMP22 protein in CMT1A is damaging to these Schwann cells and causes that protective coating to lose its integrity, which means that electric signal is not able to be delivered as well or at all. And this leads to the locomotor and coordination symptoms that patients experience. So the diagram on the right here is just indicating a nerve cell, and the Schwann cells are the things around the axon, really just insulating that nerve. And that's what helps transpire the signal. Next slide. So when thinking about how to treat CMT1A, there are two main approaches. The first is targeting the reduction of that extra PMP22, which can be done at the DNA, RNA, or protein level, in an attempt to get those levels back to that of a healthy person and to prevent the toxic effects. Another approach is to promote nerve health to try to prevent or reverse the nerve damage caused by that extra PMP22. Within each of these two main approaches, there are several different sub-approaches or modalities, which can include small molecules, which, like their name suggests, are small compounds that are often in a pill form like ibuprofen or aspirin, and are often designed to specifically target a protein. Or gene therapy, which are therapy approaches that target DNA or RNA, and biologics, which can include cell therapies or antibiotics. The current CMT1A drug development space has grown a lot in the last few years, which Clary mentioned earlier, and the approaches these companies are taking are quite diverse, which is really encouraging because that means we are attacking CMT1A on all possible fronts, and it increases our chances of finding a therapy that works. All of the programs here are at various stages from being in clinical trials, approaching clinical trials, or still in preclinical development. The CMTRF funds many of these diverse approaches, which is indicated by the green CMTRF logo. And on this slide, I'm only listing the companies working on CMT1A, but there are also many academic groups that are also working across these different diverse approaches. And this slide is also not showing all of the really great work being done on the other types of CMT. Now, while this growth is really great, our goal is to grow it even more. So I'm now going to turn it over to Artie so that he can talk about why CMT1A is an ideal indication for companies to go after right now.
Thanks, Ryan. Firstly, I'm back. So, during all the opportunities I got to connect with you all at, CMT, dinners, conference calls, having you at DTX, having you at holiday parties, I stood there many times and I said, no matter what happens with DTX, I was going to work with you all to find therapeutics, to treat not only CMT1A, but other CMTs as well. And some of you know, some of you don't, but I've spent probably the better part of anything I do professionally since I left DTX working with the CMT Foundation to go on offense, if you will, to cure, any of the many different CMTs and the forms that they come in. And I really believe deep down that there is a lot of white space in CMT that, where there are technologies that are a good fit to tackle these diseases, and that, we can attract, many of these technologies and or, inspire the optimization of some of them for CMT research. So that's why I'm here. And I've been working with, Clary, Peter, Ryan, Susan over the last 6 months or so. And I think the team felt strongly that I speak to this slide because, through, what was a very challenging 5 years to put a spotlight on the CMT1A, we did it through, talking through some of these points and reminding people why this is an indication, why there's significant unmet need worthy of both pharma and investors' attention. And I think, this is essentially the pitch that I made, to many investors over the years. Why CMT1A? Why now? One is there's a lot of patients with CMT in the U.S. and elsewhere. 1A, as well as 50% of these 150,000 have the other CMTs as well. And just for perspective, if you add up DMD plus DM1 plus FSHD, you do not get the number of patients in the U.S. With this disorder. So, that in and of itself is very attractive to pharma and investments. And make no mistake about it, Novartis bought DTX because of CMT1A, not because of our platform, because this is as much as a $7 or $8 billion opportunity if everything goes right, yearly sales. The other thing going for CMT is the field has spent, years understanding the underlying genetics, understanding or developing animal models that faithfully recapitulate almost all aspects of the disease. Maybe you've seen, some of the videos that while I was a member of the DTX team, I used to come on here and show, but I can't tell you how many patients, came up to me after and said, that mouse is me. I get it. And of course, we all sort of cried and laughed together when that mouse could walk better again. And now there's, a number of companies that have demonstrated that. But understanding the underlying genetics is key to curing a disease. I think the other thing that we're lucky to have is, there's been advancements in technologies like RNA therapeutics, like antisense, like siRNA and delivery technologies over the last 5 years that have allowed us to sort of take advantage of, some of these genetics. The last thing, and it's or maybe not even the last thing, one of the last things is trial readiness. It's very rare as a preclinical researcher to have an indication where you want to do drug development and the natural history of the disease is sorted out. And there's ongoing studies over the past decade to understand how to run clinical trials, to develop tools to be able to do that. And I can't tell you how important it was to have the work of the INC led by Dr. Shai, Scherer, Herman, and of course the international groups. But they've been developing scoring systems and such so that when a drug does go into the clinic, we will have the tools to demonstrate efficacy. And in a few minutes time, I will show you some really exciting data from just 2 weeks ago that says, this group came up with something sensitive enough for a CMT phenotype. And then I think the other thing, that makes it attractive, and why every company in the US that's a biotech company should want to work in CMT is there is no competition. So we've got a lot of patients, we've got great genetics, we've got animal models, and we have clinical data that, reams of data that say how these patients progress and such. And we have only, at least in 1A right now, one that we know of that's hopefully will file an IND in 24. We have, one hopefully close behind in Armidas Bio, but that's it. And if you guys Google just for fun, DMD or DM1 today, you will see that there are dozens and dozens of companies working on those. And so any biotech company or any pharma company, you're crazy not to be leveraging these new state-of-the-art technologies not to tackle, what's a devastating disease. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Ryan to take you a little bit through some of the science that we're excited about, but this won't be the last you'll hear from me today.
Thanks, Artie. Yeah, so even though it looks like CMTA is really set up to be an ideal indication for pharma companies, we do not yet have any approved treatments, and we really want to change that. So two key challenges were identified that was kind of leading to this barrier. The first is able to get the drug that, works, to the tissue where it needs to work, which is the peripheral nerve and the Schwann cells. And the second challenge is, already talked about this a little bit, is ensuring that clinical trials are set up to be successful in evaluating a potential drug for CMT. So in this webinar, Artie and I will discuss these challenges in a little more detail, some of the progress that's been made, and what the CMTRF is doing to continue to address these challenges. So I'll focus on the delivery challenge first. And so there are many different types of therapies that can reduce PMP22. So those exist, and they could potentially result in a disease-modifying therapy. However, when these are administered, a majority of the drug distributes to the liver, while a very small portion is able to reach the nerve, which is where it needs to go in order for it to be effective for CMT. So what is really needed is optimized versions of these types of drug that allow for more of the drug to distribute to the nerve instead of the liver. And the CMTRF realized the importance of addressing this delivery challenge very early on and went out to find companies working on novel delivery technologies. And they came across DTX Pharma, which was exploring the idea of attaching fatty acids to a type of compound that can reduce the levels of RNA for specific genes to improve their delivery to tissues outside of the liver. And this partnership between the CMTRF and DTX Pharma led to a compound called DTX-1252, which consists of a compound designed to reduce PMP22 and fatty acids that improve distribution to the nerve. This compound had amazing data that demonstrated the ability to reduce that extra PMP22 in the nerve and result in improvement of symptoms in an animal model that Artie mentioned earlier that accurately recapitulates human CMT1. And maybe many of you have seen those videos of the mice where they, after treatment, they could walk much better. So last year, DTX Pharma was acquired by Novartis, which really provided the power and resources to be able to move this compound toward the clinic. We are really excited about what the future holds for this compound, but we're also reminded that we can't predict the future. And we also know that this approach by DTX barely scratches the surface on the technologies that exist and could be leveraged to address this delivery challenge for CMT. Therefore, the CMTRF is continuing to fund both industry and academic groups that are investigating these novel delivery approaches, which include Armatus Bio, which is exploring a technology called adeno-associated virus, or AAV delivery, which is the same type of delivery used for other approved gene therapy drugs for other indications. And Nanite, which is exploring novel polymer nanoparticles for delivery. And we're also funding some novel approaches coming from the Georgia Institute of Technology, Emory School of Medicine, and Nationwide Children's Hospital. The CMTRF is also extremely dedicated to continuing that proactive approach to find novel delivery technologies that might be used for other indications right now and encourage them to be applied to CMT. And this will hopefully lead to many other promising therapies like DTX Pharma's. So if you or someone you know is working on a novel approach that you think could potentially be applied to CMT, please do not hesitate to reach out to me or anyone on our team. Just like how we want to tackle CMT1A on all fronts, we want to also tackle this delivery challenge on all fronts. because we believe that this could be what separates a drug that works versus one that doesn't work. So eventually, many of these great approaches that are being pursued are going to reach clinical trials. And we already have several companies looking to start clinical trials soon. And this means that we need to make sure that the field is set up to run a successful clinical trial and has clinical measurements that can confidently detect a benefit of a drug on CMT, which leads to the second identified challenge. And for this one, I'm going to hand it back to Artie because he knows it best.
So I alluded to this earlier, that we are, at least at DTX and as CMTRF, we are, extremely excited and grateful that, organizations like the INC and their colleagues are spending a lot of time and a lot of capital to develop endpoints that will allow us to demonstrate that a drug is efficacious in the clinic. And they're really laying the groundwork so that we can be, we know what's going on with our molecules in short order when we get to the clinic. And they've been working out these challenges and these issues with getting this. And we are so lucky in CMT that we have, these tools in development ahead of, clinical trials and clinical development, because most companies in many indications have to do this on the fly as they're developing the drugs, and that's just not great. And so one of the outcomes, I won't dwell on it too much, but it's called the CMT FOM, and there's an ongoing natural history study that's wrapping up in the next year or so, and I'm sure the Shai and others will publish this data, but they're following patients, measuring measures of strength, upper limb function, lower limb function, balance, mobility, etc. To demonstrate changes over periods of time that are meaningful in clinical development. Another cool endpoint that they have developed is what's called calf fat fraction. That'll be in the middle. I don't know if I'm supposed to click, and this is essentially an MRI of the calf. And what they found is that over on a yearly basis. Well, firstly, there's differences in calf fat in CMT patients versus healthy volunteers that enrolled in these studies. And additionally, they believe that calf fat accumulates and it's correlates well with disease severity and potentially progression of the disorder. And again, within this CMT FOM, well, this is kind of noticed after they've added this endpoint. And these are all really important endpoints or measures that drug hunters can use in the clinic to understand or get a sense of what's going on with their drug. And maybe last but not least, they've done a great job of pulling together what we call patient-reported outcomes, which is always important to regulatory authorities because they want to know on a day-to-day basis how you're feeling, how you're functioning, and that this drug is having a meaningful impact. And one way to figure that out, in addition to some of these motor coordination tests, is to go straight to the patient and do some of these surveys. And so what really is exciting, and I mean, maybe we should just stop and just say, we did have some results from Farnex. We were all disappointed by those results, but in our minds, I think we are extremely excited about the number of therapeutics that we and others are funding that actually attack the underlying genetics here. And there's a recent or underlying biology. And so on the next slide is probably the most exciting data that I've seen in a long time for CMT. And that was with relevance to CMT, and that was from Applied Therapeutics. And it was about a week or two ago. And this is for a disease or an indication called SORD. And essentially there's issues with processing sugars like sorbitol, breaking them down, et cetera. And so this axonal neuropathy This treatment is a CNS penetrant drug that's meant to help with breakdown of sorbitol. But the relevance of this data, to us as a field is really twofold. In the 12-month data, they showed that the CMT-FOM, or a composite of endpoints from the CMT-FOM, was sensitive to change, meaning that with this drug, you could measure a difference from a placebo-treated group, an improvement, or at least slowing down a progression of the disease potentially. We didn't see the actual graphs of the data, so it's a little hard for me to say whether it was prevention or improvement. But that's really exciting. That means, there's something that companies like, Novartis can point to as an endpoint that's potentially sensitive to change, something that, we weren't sure of with some of the earlier versions of this technology. So, super exciting. And I'm sure that the INC is ecstatic that their composite endpoint, may be useful for CMT drugs. I think the other thing that was really exciting is that when it came to how patients feel and function, their perception of that, the CMT Health Index also showed a statistically significant change. Again, the take-home message is that we have the right tools, or we're getting toward the right tools that we can use in the clinic to measure changes that could be used to make a case with regulatory authorities for approval of a drug that's therapeutically beneficial. And it does appear that this, in the interim data that they've presented, I would say this is exciting. They have, they've shown they can reduce the target. They've shown on a functional endpoint and how patients report and their feelings of function, it's improved. And, maybe this is lost on other folks. But this is really important, to our field, and we're all really excited about it. So on the next slide, our Chief Mission Officer, Susan, she has been working to continue to accelerate clinical trial readiness. And I want to give her a minute or two to talk through another effort that we've been championing.
Thank you, Artie, so much. So this is something that's really exciting that's happening at the CMT Research Foundation. We were approached by a woman who has CMT, who is the VP of Regulatory Affairs for biotech. She has 20 years of working with pharmaceutical companies and the FDA and making sure that the communication is clear and that the expectations are clear for how to run a clinical trial. And she came to us and said, I really recommend that we together put together some advice to the FDA that helps them understand how to run a clinical trial, and it can help companies understand how to run a clinical trial. What we don't want to do is have a company run a clinical trial and have the FDA afterwards say, well, you chose the wrong outcome score, you chose too small of a cohort, or you didn't have the right patients. That would be a colossal waste of money and time that none of us want to risk. So if we take the proactive approach and we tell the FDA, or we recommend to the FDA what we think those measurement tools should be, what we think the patient cohort should look like, then the FDA can rubber stamp that, approve that, give their feedback, and then they can distribute that to all of the companies who are planning clinical trials to set those clear expectations on the front end. So in partnership with Shannon, the Research Foundation, I'm her partner on this, we are leading a group full of clinicians and pharmaceutical companies and patient advocacy groups. We're working with all the ones in the United States together to put together these guidance documents, and we'll be submitting those to the FDA. It's a long process. We'll be doing a lot of writing, but this is an initiative that we're starting to help save time and money in the clinical trial process. And
so next slide. So, I think, the take-home message here is that 1A is in the lead in terms of, or to some extent, there's a lot of research going on in 1A that suggests, some of the treatments will be be tested, sooner than other CMTs. Although, there is actually several that are coming pretty quickly for other CMTs as well. And I think we as a team feel that we're going to learn a lot about how to do clinical trials, what is possible in terms of, reversibility of disease versus, just stopping it in its tracks. And so I think we just want to share that these learnings, the new data that's breaking on a daily basis, is really exciting, and will facilitate additional research and enthusiasm to pursue other CMTs. And maybe the last slide, which Ryan kindly developed last night with Cleary and her axe chopping through the dirt. What I really want to say is, we've rolled up our sleeves. Well, maybe firstly, the reason that the CMTRF existed, why Pat and Susan founded the CMTRF, was, to find research, but maybe more importantly, to go on offense, to not sit back and wait for scientists to come to us, for grants to come to us. Their idea was to bring the science, we bring the science to the companies and inspire them and make sure that they get going. And I think, me joining, Ryan joining more recently, we really want to blow that out to a whole new level. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there is so much white space here, and whether it be state-of-the-art technologies, and I can rip off 6 that are likely to work in CMT1A, where there's nothing, we don't have any work going on right now. We are going to bring those technologies to CMT. There's other technologies, and in my view, gene therapy fits into this bucket, where we're going to need quite a lot of optimization to enable them for CMTs, particularly for most CMT1, not anything not named CMT1A is a good way to frame it. And so on that front, we are going to the scientists, we are putting groups together, and we are doing, modeling some of the success stories in other diseases that have come to fruition recently. And maybe the other thing that I'll mention that we're doing that I think is differentiated to some extent is, in some cases, we're doing the experiments ourselves. The foundation is working with CROs to answer key questions that have relevance to the whole field. We're making animal models. We are answering key target validation questions. And so, we're not sitting back in our chairs waiting for proposals to come into us. We are bringing proposals to the scientists and to the companies. That's why I'm here. And as anyone, on the CMTRF board knows, I don't have, the patience to just sit back and wait, to try to cure this debilitating disorder, especially knowing how much white space there is out there already that we can inspire. So I'll turn it back over to Cleary, I think, to continue.
Vanessa? Oh, so sorry. I did want to say one thing. We're actually turning it over to Peter, but Artie, thank you for that, because I think it's really important that we are not waiting, and that we are totally on offense and want to make sure that we're really seeking all of the right work and being very aggressive about it. So thank you for that. And, we're also open to working with, any collaborators that have ideas that make sense. So we're all in this pool together, and we need to just keep the pressure on ourselves and the community. So actually, we're turning things over to Peter Da Silva, who is a CMTRF board member and has been just remarkable as the lead on the CMT1A Endgame Capital Campaign. Peter?
Thank you, Clary. And Artie, you know, every time I hear you speak, it just gives me more and more confidence, more and more certainty that an end will happen to CMTA in our respective lifetimes. It's an exciting time to be part of CMT research. I can't thank you enough personally for your dedication to this cause. We're going to figure this out. We're going to get this done. You know, today, interestingly, of course, is Rare Disease Day, and I was sitting in my office earlier in the day, and CNBC came on or was on, and they spent a whole hour today talking about Rare Disease Day. We had Dr. Scott Gottlieb, which was one of their commentators, lead commentators on health and science, speak for an hour with lots of guests, and it was just so helpful to hear the insights that they were providing and the hope and optimism with which they were speaking about rare diseases generally and therapeutics and approaches to solving a lot of these rare diseases, which really aren't rare. As we say at the CMTRF, you know, CMT is not rare to me. If you have it, it's certainly not rare to you. Well, this is a picture of me when I was a youngster, and boy, am I glad I grew up, because I was not a very good-looking guy. It seems like I had pretty big hands too. But leaving that aside, I did grow up with CMT1A, and I was diagnosed along with my sister in our early teen years, and it was a bit devastating. You know, when you're a child and you're different than everybody else, that's a difficult thing to deal with, quite honestly. We all know, or maybe you don't. I know what it's like to be, you know, the last one to be picked for a baseball team, or the last one to be picked for a basketball game, or, you know, the person who can't run, or the person who trips all the time. And I have this true story about literally being at, you know, the last inning of a baseball game, and I'm up at bat and it's 2 outs. And if I can only make it to first base, we win. Well, I get a hit, but I trip and fall and I'm tagged out. That story has been with me for 62 years. Well, that's not right. 52 years, probably. I was probably about 10 when that happened. And that's what it's like living with CMT1A. I mean, I'm grateful that it's not cancer and it's not deadly, but it has a massive impact on life and lifestyle. And I hope everybody knows that. And, you know, I made a choice. My parents suggested it, and I agreed with it for the first 55 years of my life, which was to keep it private, keep it to myself. It was my issue, they told me. It was our family's issue, and nobody else needed to know. But as time went on, and, you know, you have children, if you go to the next slide, you'll see this is my amazing daughter, Sarah, who I love dearly. And it became clear very early that she would have CMT as well. We have one other daughter, Christine, who doesn't show any signs of it at this juncture, but Sarah's dealing with it much the same as I was dealing with it at that age. And we know this is our third generation. It could even be more than that, but my dad, who had it, his father died when he was just 30, and so it's hard for us to know how it actually, you know, became part of the fabric of our family. But we're at least a third generation CMT family. And I got to tell you, it's something that I want to work with Artie and with all of you and the funders and the scientists to really find a way in our lifetime to have this ameliorated for sure. My friend Pat Livney, you know, was urging me to get involved for 2 decades. Well, yeah, close to 2 decades. And I kept saying, no. Here's a few dollars, and I'll help you fund projects, but I don't want to get involved. I don't want to be a face for this. Well, how wrong I was. How absolute wrong I was. You know, to not be more upfront and out front with my CMT so that I could maybe help others along the way. And when I joined the CMTRF board, not long thereafter, Pat said to me, "Hey, Peter, we need to launch a campaign. We need to raise some serious money." And the group had been raising good money, but he's like, "We really need to raise some serious money." So if you flip the page, Pat proposed to me, he said, "Well, why don't you run a campaign along with Susan Rudiger to raise $10 million?" I said, $10 million? I mean, Pat, I have 2 reactions to that. One is, that's a lot of money. We haven't raised that much as an organization just yet. And my other reaction was, that's not a lot of money if we think about what it's going to take to ultimately solve the riddle of CMT. So we did what many organizations do. We asked a consultant to help us think through what would be a reasonable amount that we could raise. And they said, you know, you could probably raise 5 to 7 million. You have a fairly small CMT community. You're going to have to penetrate the outer rings of those concentric circles of donors. In the middle, of course, are donors who are impacted. The next concentric circle are friends of donors that are impacted or family members. The further you get out from the center, the less connection and the less relationship individuals have to the disease. But to raise 10, they said, you're really going to have to penetrate those outer rings of that fundraising strata, or you're not gonna be successful. But Susan and I sat down and said, what the heck? Let's go for it. Let's do 10 million. Let's make it happen, and let's do it in no more than 3 years. And we went off. And instead of saying, why are we going to do this? We basically say, why not? Let's go do it. And then the other thing we've talked about is, this isn't like a project. This was the start of a movement. This was the start of a movement to end, ultimately, all types of CMT. This is not a CMT1A organization. We are here to end all types of CMT. But if you flip the page, and I think Artie's already done a really good job of explaining why we started with 1A, we have a good basic understanding of the science. And again, Artie and Ryan have talked about that, I think, quite convincingly tonight. We understand the disease mechanisms. We understand it's an overexpression of PMP22, et cetera. And so that understanding really helped us. We don't have yet that basic understanding of some of the other CMT disease types. There are robust pathways to treatment. So again, this is the furthest along. The research around 1A is the furthest along. So we said, well, that makes sense then that we should focus there. And lastly, because of the size of the cohort, there is interest from industry. There's real money to be made. And let's be honest, money talks. And when you've got 75,000 patients in the United States with 1A, and you've got 1.5 million or so around the world, pharma is willing to invest in that because they believe they'll get a return on that investment down the road. So for these reasons, this is why we started with 1A. But I want to emphasize again, the CMTRF is not a 1A organization. It is an organization committed and dedicated to the eradication of all types of CMT over time. So where are we on our campaign? I feel pretty darn good. Here we are at 7.9 million. And so again, the consultant said, 5, yeah, you can do that. 7, ooh, that's a stretch. Here we stand at roughly 8 million today. And we have funded dozens of projects from these funds. This is not money sitting in the bank. When we get this money in, we prioritize the very best science with Artie and Ryan and the team. We invest in that science right away and deploy those dollars just as quickly as we can in the finest science we can find, not just in the United States, but candidly around the world. And we have funded projects around the world. We make sure every project has an ROI. We make sure that we take royalties or take an equity position in every project that we find where we can. Some of the academic projects, that's a little bit hard to do, but anywhere that we're able to, we take a royalty position or an equity position to create future revenue streams that will perpetuate the funding of more research as we go forward. And sometimes when you do these kinds of campaigns, you have a couple of very large donors, and that's sort of it. Well, we said we want to spread the wealth. We really want as many people to participate in this campaign as possible. And we've got certainly close to 100 donors and well over 100 donations. And we've had 3 donations over $1 million, 7 between 100,000 and $1 million, 30 between 10,000 and 100,000, and 53 below 10,000. So we've worked really hard to get the entire community engaged and involved in helping us raise these funds. And I couldn't be prouder of the community coming together to help us raise these funds so we can put it against the very, very best science known to man today. And so here's some exciting news. One of our most generous donors, who's a repeat donor, came back a week or 2 ago and said, you know what, I know you guys are doing this event. It's Rare Disease Day. What if we do a $100,000 match for the evening? I'm like, that would be phenomenal. Absolutely fabulous. So we have a $100,000 match we're announcing this evening. It does run for the next 4 weeks or so till the end of March. We really, really hope you'll consider participating. Whether it's $10 or anything more than that, it will make a difference. It'll allow us to put those dollars into research immediately and into the best research we can find. I often think that, okay, $10 million, we're going to need more than that over time, of course, and we'll continually fundraise. But imagine for a minute that we get to 95% of a solution. Like we're really, really close. but we can't raise the last, I'm making this up, $100,000, whatever it might be. And the project just has to stop. How sad would that be? How sad would that be for the community? The problem is, I don't know right now, none of us know which projects though are going to be in that bucket. Which project is at the 95th percentile and it's going to take X amount of money to get it to the 100th to prove it or disprove it? None of us really know. And so we need every dollar so we can take, smart calculated risks on the projects and programs that we think offer the most benefit to patients ultimately. And so, I never want to be in that position where we talk about, well, what could have been or what should have been. Let's raise the money. Let's deploy it against the best science, which is the mission of the CMTRF, and let's have the outcomes that we all really want to have for the patient community. And so on the next slide, look, connect with us, please. Again, whether you've got $10 or you've got $100 or you've got more than that, connect with one of us. Susan Rudiger, our co-founder and chief mission officer. You can see her contact information there. You can connect with myself or Anna Combs, our vice president of philanthropy, who's done an extraordinary job in the first 8 or 9 months that she's been with us, really building out our community. And I'm very grateful for her and for Susan and for the entire team. So please connect with us. It's not about how much one gives. It's just about being present and being part of the CMTRF team. The other thing I want to mention tonight is just something I'd like you to get on your calendars, if you could. This is the 2024 edition of the Global CMT Research Convention. We host this every year. We've been doing it in Cambridge, Massachusetts. This will be our third year, September 26th to 28th. Put it on your calendar. It is let's be clear, the preeminent scientific research convention about CMT. Folks from all over the world travel to Cambridge to hear our team and to engage with each other about how we can improve the science and accelerate the science to eradicate CMT. So put it on your calendar. You can go to our website to sign up. You see it there, cmtconvention.cmtrf.org, and we hope to see you in Cambridge this fall. And I'll just close with this word cloud that, today's gift of however amount is truly tomorrow's cure. If you've given before, thank you. If you'll consider giving tonight, thank you. If you'll consider giving in the future, thank you. If you'll consider telling your friends and your family about us, I'm grateful for that as well. So thank you again. We named our campaign Endgame because we want this to be Endgame. And so I hope you'll join us in making it true, making it the end game for CMT1A at least. And again, rest assured, our organization is about curing all types of CMT. We will not go away until all types of CMT are cured. We're just starting with 1A for the reasons that we talked about earlier. So with that, I think we're going to open it up for questions and answers. And for that, I'm going to turn it back to Clary.
I think I've been talking to my mute button. Thank you, Susan, Artie, Ryan, Peter, Vanessa, all of the people who make this happen. It really does take a village. We are all committed, as I think Artie expressed so eloquently. We're in this. We are in this to a cure, and we're just going to do whatever it takes. And I know that I'd love to give you a whole list of our scientific advisory board. I won't do that now. They are on our website. These are people who are busy clinicians, busy researchers, busy drug developers, and industry executives who give their time on a volunteer basis to help achieve this mission. And it's quite remarkable. The other group is the Research Advisory Committee that Artie sort of helped us shape. And that is Charlotte Sumner, Grace Pavlath, Will Motley, Paul August, and Artie. And these are also some of the busiest people in the world who have come together to say, how do we go on offense? What is the best pathway for us to take? What are the questions that we need to answer to sort of unlock a lot more potential therapeutic opportunities for all types of CMT? So you know, you just can't say thank you enough to these people. And Susan, I'm going to let you moderate questions, but I want to reiterate one thing that Peter said. I probably will 3 more times. We all together will make this happen. And so we're very grateful that you're here. We're grateful that you are committed. We would love to hear from you. So reach out to Peter, Susan, Anna, me, Ryan, Artie, all of us. This is what we do every day, and we like to hear from you with any ideas that you have. So Susan, questions?
Thanks, Clary, so much. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please pop them in the question and answer section, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We have received a few questions so far throughout the presentation. I'm going to try and answer as many of them as we possibly can. We only have 4 minutes until the top of the hour, so maybe we'll take a couple questions now. And then for those of you who are interested in staying on and want to pass some more questions through the Q&A, I know the team here will be happy to take your questions. But for those of you who need to leave at 8, please feel free to do so. One question we have from a person named Mangala, and Ryan and Artie, this question's for you. How much PMP22 decrease is needed to see a meaningful change in the clinical outcomes?
Good question. Artie, you want me to take it? Okay. So I mentioned earlier that, healthy people have 2 copies of PMP22, and in CMT1A, there's 3 copies. So the ideal amount of PMP22 you want is to get back to the 2 copies. So that would mean approximately 30% knockdown of the total levels of PMP22 that CMT1A patients have. So I didn't mention this earlier, but there's also a similar condition that happens called HMPP when you've reduced PMP22 too much. So there's this fine balance of PMP22 knockdown that you really want to get to.
Thanks, Ryan. Another question that we have is from a mother whose child has CMT, but doesn't have a genetic diagnosis. And we've spent a lot of time today talking about CMT1A, but how does this mother need to think about future treatments for their child without a genetic diagnosis? And their child's 9.
Is that also a question for Artie and I?
I think so, yes. Sorry.
My advice would be, to just keep holding on to hope. The goal of the foundation is to find a cure for all CMTs. And, we're also currently pursuing approaches that have the potential to work across several subtypes, regardless of the genetic lesion. So it's a possibility that there could be something approved that could work for many types of CMT.
Thank you.
I was just going to add, and I need help from someone else, but and I'm just blanking on his name, but there's an awesome investigator that is doing a lot of genetic fishing. Zuckner, yes. Zuckner. I know him well. I'm just blanking on his name, but yeah, he's doing some amazing work finding very rare genes that are contributing to CMT. So, worth putting him on, the list of people if you're searching for a rare subtype. He certainly could be a great contact.
Thanks, Artie. It is now just about the top of the hour. We'll stay on because we're getting lots of questions coming through, and I really appreciate that. But Clary, for those of the people who need to go, do you want to wrap up with some comments?
I just want to thank you for, I'm probably going to say something I've said twice before tonight, but I want to thank you for being here, for being committed to finding treatments for 1A and other types of CMT, and truly welcome you to participate in any way that you are that you have capacity, interest, or would like to learn more from us, with us. There's so many ways to participate in this process of seeking, finding, and developing therapeutics. And some of them are fundraising, some of them are advocating, some of them are networking. You know, there are just many, many ways to be part of the community. So we welcome you and invite you to come back. This is a conversation we want to continue on a regular basis. And so please come back, talk to us, give us your thoughts, give us your questions. We are going to continue this journey relentlessly.
Thanks, Clary. And it's actually really great to say that we're seeing some questions and comments come through the Q&A. A woman came through saying she's a nurse and a freelance writer. She has CMT and she wants to lend her talents to the Research Foundation and all of the efforts to cure CMT. So thank you for that. We also have another question maybe about some things that we can do. One question here from Anne is, can we and should we tag CMT Research Foundation in our online fundraising on social media? And I think that's a resounding yes.
Yes,
We
yes.
love that. Thank you, Anne, for the question. I see another question here about support. And Peter, this one might be for you, but are there any opportunities? This question's from Tracy. Are there any opportunities for people who don't have CMT to directly support ongoing trials and research? We know that your friend group has really been rather supportive. And then about the trials and research, Artie and Ryan will have you take that part.
Well, certainly, you know, we'd love to engage with friends of friends and folks who want to engage in our mission. I have found it very gratifying that certainly the patient community is engaged, but the more the patient community talks about it, the more others become aware of it, the more they're interested in helping us solve it. So, you know, this is a little bit of, and I had to get over this, you know, don't be so timid about it. Let's talk about it. All of us talk about it in our circles of influence, and all of a sudden I think people will support us because they want to support you. And that was the thing I had to learn, quite honestly, was going to my friends and saying, hey, let me tell you about this situation I have. Would you be willing to help? And of course they said, yeah, I mean, absolutely, we'd love to help you. So from that perspective, you know, keep working those concentric circles. But I'll turn it over to Artie for any other thoughts on that one.
And Artie, I think what we want you to speak to is when you were interacting, when you were at DTX and interacting with all of the clinicians and thinking about clinical trials, what kind of feedback did you get from the clinicians about their numbers of patients, how patients can connect with them, what patients can do right now when there isn't an active clinical trial going on for CMT1A? What are some recommendations that you have for them to get involved?
Yeah, I mean, one, I would say that all of, the, physicians that I've mentioned throughout the course of this call are committed and passionate and have a whole bunch of ongoing protocols to study and prepare for clinical trials. And so whether it's Shy, whether it's Cher, whether it's Charlotte, they are, in touch and understand all the ongoing different projects to set us up for success. So I think when you visit your physician, your neurologist, I think ask them. There's plenty of opportunities to be involved to help set this community up for more rapid success by doing this. I mean, I would just say, like, our conversations with physicians with DTX is like, how can we make, continue to fuel the work that you're doing so we have as much data as possible to make decisions during clinical development. So I think, the short version is all these KOLs are knowledgeable about all the ongoing protocols. So, and there are tons of them still to this date. And I know they're looking for more.
Thanks, Artie. So we've got a couple questions about signing up for clinical trials and about further genetic testing when they come back negative. And is there a patient registry for genetics? And I think that all kind of falls into the same category. And you mentioned earlier, Artie, the INC, or the Inherited Neuropathies Consortium. And what the Inherited Neuropathies Consortium is a group of clinics around the world. And we can drop the link into, well, I guess we'll put it in the follow-up email that comes from the follow-up from the webinar, but the link to the Inherited Neuropathies Consortiums and where those clinics are, because it's likely that you can get genetic testing at most of those clinics. It's likely that you can get a lot of information about how to manage pain and how to manage your foot drop and other symptoms for CMT. And it's this group of clinicians through the Inherited Neuropathies Consortium that are building this patient registry for both genetics and the symptoms of CMT and the natural history for CMT. So it's a great place to go. It's a great place as a patient to participate in the gathering of all that information and to get the information you're looking for. And then it's a great place for the pharmaceutical companies and interested partners to get the data and to gather that. That took care of maybe 5 questions here. But there's one other question, I think, Ryan, this one's for you, which is, how does a person get more information about the 21 companies that are working in CMT1A now?
Good question. You can, first off, you could always just try to go to our website. We have the pipeline of all the companies there on the website. And if you want more information, don't hesitate to reach out to me or anyone else at the CMTRF. We can get you whatever information you're looking for.
Thank you. We've also had a number of questions come through asking if we've got a recording of this. And the answer is yes. It'll take us a couple days to get the recording together, but we'll send a follow-up email when the recording is ready. In that, we'll put the Inherited Neuropathies Consortium link. So anyone who's looking for a CMT clinic that's focused only on CMT, you can go get that information as well. So a recording of this plus a link to the clinics. And then here's somebody named Mohammed, and Mohammed knows he has CMT, but he doesn't know what type of CMT he has. Ryan, can you talk for a minute about how a patient goes about getting that genetic diagnosis?
I can try. So there are a few resources out there to get genetic testing. We could also send out the links to those. And already mentioned earlier about Stefan Zuckner. So he's an investigator that we work with who, does a lot of research on some of these more rare disorders where the gene involved is not known. So I think if you do one of these CMT genetic testing panels and that doesn't give you the answer that you need, you could reach out to us and we could connect you with some other resources.
One last question that's come through, and Artie, this one's for you. Maybe Cleary, this one's for you as well. I think I'd like your opinions, each of your opinions on this, maybe even Peter, from a patient perspective. If DTX is so far along and DTX is looking so promising, and that one page that Ryan showed of all the companies that are working in CMT, why do we need to continue to raise money? Why can't we just stop now and say, let's let these guys play out and hold off on the research, hold off on doing more? What is driving the need for more money and for more research? And why don't we just rest on our laurels at this point?
Oh, Artie, you go.
I have the biggest conflict of interest on this one, right? So, the reality is drug development is really hard. And, even with the genetic disease, like CMT1A, where the people work on these because the odds of a given therapeutic being successful are higher. DTX today, despite all the encouraging animal data that was generated and placed into the public domain, has about a 10% chance of success. And if you look at all of the other, DMD, right? DM1, now FSHD. Look at CF cystic fibrosis. How many shots on goal did they need to get a breakthrough? A lot, and it was incremental, right? Cystic fibrosis, there was one, then you stacked a 2 on it, now you stack 3, now they're stacking like 2 with another one. So I think, the odds of DTX being successful are low, and there's so many other technologies available. We have to be on offense. We need 10 companies working on CMT1A, maybe 20 to have one win. And we may even need 100 companies if you start from the very beginning of drug development, because it's hard. The odds are stacked against you. So what I used to tell my team at DTX, and also when anyone would listen to me, I would say, I don't know whether DTX is going to be successful. I don't have any specific insight into what's going on with DTX's asset, now that it's at Novartis. August 15th was the last thing I heard anything. And that's by design, of course. But what I will say is that DTX is leading the way in terms of what we can learn and increase the probability of success of others, both, in animal models and in safety studies, which hopefully will eventually be shared in the public domain. And then, of course, with clinical development as that asset moves into the clinic. And so in order to set ourselves up to be successful for next generations and to build off these learnings, we need to, put more things into the pipeline. I personally would not feel comfortable resting on DTX. And there's probably, only 4 other people in the world right now that are more incentivized than me to root for DTX, right? And so I'm saying that. So that should be powerful.
I think the other aspect of that, Artie, to your point, is even if DTX is successful, which we all hope it will be, that there is not one size fits all for all patients, and that it might be an appropriate therapeutic for certain patients, but we might need a different modality, and we might need a small molecule, or we might need a different type of treatment for other patients. So you have to keep at it. You have to keep going on those shots on goal.
Yeah, when I run a business, we always talk about test and learn, test and learn, test and learn, right? It's get something out there quickly, test it, learn, revise, improve, go back to the market again. It's a very, very similar kind of thing. And quite honestly, we've already talked at the foundation about, we're going to wrap up this 10 million this year. What's the next 25 million? We're going to need to continue to raise funds, particularly against all the disease types we want to go after. So between test and learn and the idea that, we're going to continue to raise funds, we're not done yet. We're actually at the end of the beginning, not at the beginning of the end.
That's a good way to put it.
Well, speaking of being at the end of the beginning, we are now at the beginning of the end of our webinar.
Very nice, Susan. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Wow. I just want to point out, from the number of people who joined this webinar, it has been such an honor and privilege to see people from around the world. I just got a chat from someone in Australia. Marina, thank you for being here. We've had researchers, we've had pharma companies, we've had loads and loads of patients who are here, and patient families who are here. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. Anything else, Clary?
No, I don't think so. I was going to say, if you want to come to the next staff meeting and you have great ideas, come.
But definitely join us at the convention in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the end of September. Thank you all for coming here tonight. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of this effort to end this disease that affects me and Peter and Clary's daughter and so many of us around the world. We're so grateful for your support, and have a great night.
Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.
Right.